All right, today we're going to crack open the playbook on how policy actually gets made. Think of this as your practical guide to understanding and maybe, just maybe, influencing the decisions that shape all of our lives.
You've been there, right? We all have. You see a problem, you've got this brilliant, evidence-backed solution, and crickets. Nothing happens. It's so frustrating. But the truth is, a good idea is really just your ticket to get into the game. Actually winning that game, that takes a completely different set of skills.
So, how do you turn that great idea into reality? Well, we're going to walk through a 5-step process. We'll start with why policies fail in the first place, then get into a tool called stakeholder analysis, map out the political landscape, gather some intel, and finally, build a winning strategy. Let's do it.
Okay, first things first. Why do so many smart, well-intentioned policies just completely crash and burn? The simple answer is that you can never separate the content of a policy from the messy politics of making it happen.
You know, you got to think of it this way. Policy isn't cooked up in some sterile lab. It's forged in a crowded, noisy arena full of competing interests, hidden agendas, and raw power struggles. To succeed, you have to understand this hidden landscape. And the map for that landscape? That's what we call political policy analysis.
So, where do we even begin to map this complex world? Well, the most fundamental tool you have is identifying the stakeholders. It's all about figuring out who the key players are in this very complicated game.
And what's a stakeholder? It's literally anyone, and I mean anyone, who has some kind of interest in the outcome. They might love your idea, they might hate it, or they might just be affected by it. Pinpointing every single one is absolutely the crucial first step.
And let me tell you, the range of stakeholders can be absolutely massive. You've got your consumer groups, like patient advocates. Then there are producer groups, like doctors' associations or big pharma. You've got economic groups, like insurance companies. And of course, ideological groups, from political parties to think tanks. Each one has its own agenda.
Okay, once you know who all the players are, it's time to map the battlefield. This is where we analyze two really critical things for each stakeholder: how much power they have and where they stand on your policy.
We can actually break this down into a pretty simple 3-step process. First, list everybody involved. Second, take a hard look at how powerful each of them really is. And third, you map out whether they're for or against your proposed change. It's a systematic way to see the forces you're dealing with.
And when we talk about power, look, it's not just about who has the deepest pockets. Sure, money is a part of it, but power can be tangible, like having a ton of votes or a huge membership base, but it can also be intangible, like being seen as a credible expert, having public trust, or being able to get on the news whenever you want. You have to consider all of it.
And this is exactly why this map is so valuable. As the source material puts it, this map is your strategic starting point. It immediately shows you who your potential allies are and who's going to try to block you every step of the way.
Check this out. This is a real-world example from a health reform effort in the Dominican Republic. Just by glancing at this, you can see the reformers had some heavy hitters on their side, like international agencies and even the president's office. But look at the opposition. They were up against the super powerful Medical Association and the Social Security Institute. This simple chart just lays bare the entire political challenge they were facing.
So you've identified the players, you've mapped out their power, now you need to fuel this whole analysis with information. This phase is all about intelligence gathering.
And you have to cast a really wide net. I mean, you look at the obvious stuff, government reports, academic articles, yeah, but you also need to be digging through news coverage, watching social media, and crunching the data. And sometimes, the real gold is hidden in some pretty unexpected places. Because what people say in public isn't always their real game plan, right? To get the full picture, sometimes you gotta find out what they're saying behind closed doors.
For example, get this. An internal document from the tobacco company Philip Morris laid out their entire playbook. It detailed all these tactics, like manufacturing grassroots campaigns, using third-party experts to make their case, and flooding newspapers with op-eds. This is the kind of intel that can completely change your strategy.
All right, let's bring it all home. We've done the analysis, we've gathered our intelligence. The final, most important step is to turn all that knowledge into an actual, actionable political strategy. And there's a really handy way to think about this, a framework from Roberts and his colleagues. It basically boils down all your strategic options into 4 simple categories they call the 4 Ps. That's position, power, players, and perception.
So the first P is position. The strategic question here is, how can you influence where stakeholders stand on your issue?
Can you actually persuade opponents to change their minds? Or maybe you can cut a deal, bargain with them to at least get them to back off.
The second P is power. Now, the balance of power isn't set in stone. Your strategy could be all about strengthening your allies, giving them more resources, more airtime, more legitimacy. And at the same time, you can work to weaken the resources of those who oppose you.
The third P is players. Who is actually in the arena fighting this out? A really clever strategy might be to bring new players into the game. Maybe you mobilize a group that wasn't paying attention before and turn them into a powerful new ally.
And finally, we have perception. This is all about the story you're telling. How is the problem being framed? By reframing the issue, you can completely shift the political dynamics and build a much bigger coalition of support. The best strategies often hit on all four of these at once.
So there you have it. That's the code. It's a framework for moving beyond just having a good idea and hoping for the best. It's a method for understanding the real world of politics and building a smart strategy to navigate it. So the question for you is, what policy do you care about? And now that you have these tools, who holds the power to change it?